who's our current acting Vice-Chancellor, after the departure of Vice-Chancellor Karen Cox in March, and she's been the steward of that office. So, George, would you mind telling us a little bit about what being VC entails and why you're here today?
Sure. Thanks, Lula, and thanks for the invitation, everyone. It's a real honour to be here and to get to speak to you all and to ask some of the questions. So, good question, Lula. It's a complex office, I think it's fair to say. But for me personally, serving in Office of Vice-Chancellor is a huge privilege. I was a student at university myself. Seeing that video gives me goosebumps, realising how much amazing stuff happens across the university all the time. So thank you for sharing that. As Vice-Chancellor, there's various aspects of university business that I'm responsible for. So obviously I'm the Chief Exec of the university, so the leader of the whole community, that's students, that's staff, all our alumni and stakeholders that are engaged with the university and are our beneficiaries. So that's obviously a significant role. What does that mean? What does that look like? Well, it means that I'm responsible for the financial and academic performance of the university, including the compliance and regulatory requirements that the university have. I do work with a team, so I have an executive group and officers within the executive group who've got particular responsibilities. So there's a number of deputy vice-chancellors with responsibility for overall strategy, for education and student experience, for research and innovation. We also have a chief financial officer and a director of human resources, who are all part of the executive group alongside a number of academic PVCs who look after our academic schools. So we are part of a wider team. So some of the questions today, some of the details I may need to have to take away and liaise with that team, but I will do my best to cover everything off today as best I can. The other significant part of my role is really around external stakeholders. So I spend a lot of time championing the university, outside the university with our stakeholders, whether that's employers, industry, funders, the regulator obviously, and politicians locally and nationally, and of course that international stage is so important for the university as well. So multifaceted, and hopefully we'll be able to get into some of that today. So thanks for being here.
Brilliant, well thank you for joining us. So we're going to move to our first round of questions. So essentially we had the form open for a couple of weeks and students were able to submit questions to yourself and well, to us, and they broadly fit into 4 categories. We're also going to have some time at the end for live audience questions and on the live stream as well. But our first one is tuition fees. So obviously, as I'm sure we're all aware, recently the government raised the undergraduate tuition fee cap for the first time in 7 years, and it will rise by 3.08% in the next academic year to £9,535 for undergraduates. Now, the fees are linked to inflation going forward, and predictions estimate that fees will hit $10,750 over the next 4 years. So for many students, this has left them across the country unsure of what this actually means to them, because last time this happened, consumer protection laws meant that only some universities could raise those fees mid-degree. So essentially, the first question is the University of Kent planning on increasing tuition, and will this affect current students, and where can we expect to see this money go?
Okay, thanks, Lulu, and fair question. So this is obviously relatively new news for all of us, and universities weren't expecting this news either, particularly because it was announced after the budget. But of course there have been calls around wider financial sustainability for universities, and we've been part of that lobbying as well for a number of years. I think everybody recognises that the costs of everything have increased, and for us it's really about making sure we can preserve the best quality student experience and investment wherever we can. Now I recognise that obviously, the fee system in the UK, in England, there's a variety of political choices to be made about who best pays for that, and the mix of contribution towards the cost of university education and provision. At the moment, as I said, we weren't expecting it, so we are working through our internal governance processes, so I'm not able to say exactly what will happen for us at this time. Bearing in mind we're already a university that offer many of the things that were suggested as linked to the fee increase, and I can come back to that I do expect that we will, along with many other universities, increase the fee. But the exact details of how that will work, we will need to confirm in due course when we're better able to provide the concrete information that students need. What we certainly welcome is that alongside fees, there was also a recognition of two things. One is the maintenance loans. So we were pleased to see the increase in provision for maintenance loans. I recognise that's more complicated and depends on individuals' circumstances, but we were pleased to see that because we do recognise that students have been particularly affected by cost of living issues. The second was the review of the whole funding model. And for us, this is really the key thing. You know, we need to make sure that our universities, which are one of the most outstanding national assets that we have, are preserved and protected, and that we're able to continue offering the best for our students and stakeholders for the long term. So that's what we really welcome, is in that wider commitment. I've also seen some of the figures you suggested around what this would mean in the longer term, but I hope that a wider scale review means that we can actually go back to some of those fundamental questions of what is the offer, who pays, and how we best support students.
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of current students, it's obviously still being reviewed, and when that information is available, then we'll know.
Yeah. So there were a few things that were raised in the government announcement around what the kind of expectation is on universities for charging that higher fee. That was around access and participation planning. There was a mention of civic engagement, so engaging with regional players and contributing to economic growth, and also reviewing efficiency. Those are all things that Kent already does well, and part of our new strategy, Kent 2030, is trying to advance those even further. So we think we're on the right, we are contributing to the government's agenda in terms of their priorities for equality of opportunity in education.
That's great to hear, thank you. So the second question on this is, what measures will the university implement to support students affected by the tuition fee rise, particularly those from lower income backgrounds? And that of course comes on to what you were just talking about.
So already we do a number of things. So we do have a Kent financial support package, which is, again, depends on individuals' unique, their own background and circumstances, but there is finance available for students from wider participation backgrounds from lower income households. And that's on top of the maintenance loans and provisions from government as independent of that. That's the university localised in Kent financial support package. We also, of course, are doing all the work we can to make sure that the degree is value for money. And a lot of this is around making sure that the degree that students come to study at the university really does support for the skills and knowledge needed when going to a career or a job in the future. So, we can talk about 2030 because that, of course, is when we expect our graduates to be really active in the workplace. So we are making sure that we're ensuring that all our graduates are work ready, if you like, for when they've completed their degree, which should support the wider environment as well. There's other financial support packages in place that I'm happy to go into those really now if they might have questions later. So we do also have a number of hardship funds for students that can be accessed through the student services, student support and wellbeing. We've obviously been trying to make sure that we're investing in keeping costs low. Now, I appreciate the cost of everything is increasing, but some of what we've been doing is really trying to ensure we can provide a range of price, for example, in our accommodation, ensuring we have got provision of lower price meals in our outlets with the meal deal. Obviously, free sports membership, ensuring that students have got access to that well-being and physical opportunities on campus, and also language provision, again linked to that skills agenda. So there are various things that we are doing to try and support students in what we recognise as a significant cost of living crisis across the country, but affects students in a very particular way.
Thank you. And so we'll move on to our next round of questions, which surrounds Kent 2030. We had quite a few questions around this. Obviously, we have seen that the Kent 2030 work is underway. There's some changes that will come in more recently, which I'm sure you can expand on. But essentially, when Kent 2030 was announced, it came with that big backlash regarding course closures, and many students feeling that they don't actually have an understanding of what that strategy entails still, and how it's going to impact them past the current course closures. So the first question says, several students have written in regarding the Kent 2030 strategy, some criticising it, feeling that profit is being prioritised over the academic environment. Could you please give a brief overview of the strategy, its end goals, and what this means for current students?
I'll try to be brief.
I understand.
There's a lot within it. So, and it's a fair question. I think it's really interesting to hear it portrayed back in that way. So, in terms of the wider strategy, and this alludes to what I was saying previously, we've been trying to think future-proof. So, really trying to get ahead of a lot of the things that are now coming forward in UK policy, but internationally as well. And this sense of skills, of work readiness, preparing for what work will look like in the future. I mean, we know with technological advances that things will look different to how they look today. So really what we've been trying to do at Kent 2030 is keep that in mind with the future focus. And there's three aspects to it. The first is around excellence in education. So really making sure that the education we deliver for our students is rich in terms of its connectivity with our research excellence base, so that research is at the heart of a lot of the education that we offer. That it is built around skills of the future, and that we are making sure we scaffold assessments and scaffold opportunities for students as they progress. The second is around making sure we put students at the heart of all we do. So this is really about making sure that we are linked with employers, that we are providing flexibility and timetable, really ensuring that students are at the heart of our decision making. And we recognise we've got work to do around some of that, which is why opportunities like today are really important, because it's actually hearing directly from students, past, current and future, that will support our work in that space. And the third is around working with partners, so where they bring innovation, where they bring funding, where they bring expertise, making sure that we've really got a range of strategic partners that we're working with, that we're not Kent-centric in terms of just focusing inwardly, but actually where there are opportunities to do things better with others, we're embracing those opportunities. So it's those three core strands. Now, a lot of that is also linked to ensuring the university is financially sustainable. Part of that work meant that we did have to take the difficult decision to withdraw some of our courses last year. And I think it is certainly, as I said, helpful to hear a reflection back that is kind of got wrapped into what Kent 2030 is about. It isn't. Kent 2030 is about the future, and that decision around withdrawing certain subject areas and courses was actually about ensuring financial sustainability, so we've got a sound footing for that future. Difficult choices.
Thank you. I think that elaboration is really helpful, especially when certain parts are the ones that are the most seen, and there's a lot that's unseen. It's finding those ways to make sure that students are able to access and have that transparency. So thank you. So the next question comes from a law student, but mirrors the feelings of many students from other disciplines who are concerned about the upcoming 2025 restructures, particularly the impact on module offerings. So this uncertainty has led some to consider transferring to other institutions, even if that means restarting their degree. When and how will the university provide more transparency regarding course structures and module options for the upcoming academic year to alleviate these concerns?
Okay, helpful to hear that, and I will definitely take it back and work through what that means, because I don't know the details of that particular case. But certainly in terms of the overall course offering, last year we did some work with our current students around what and how we'd be doing some of these modifications. As I said, these are all with student outcomes and future-proofing in mind. So this is to actually improve the way we do assessments, so assessments are closer to delivery of teaching, the way we kind of scaffold the learning throughout the courses, the way we embed employability and inclusivity within the curriculum. So these are innovations and enhancements, but clearly if they're not being communicated or understood in that way, then we've got a gap that we need to fill, and I will certainly take that away and make sure we address it. Definitely in law, but it'd be helpful if we could cover some opinion if that's more broadly as well. But yeah, definitely no need to transfer because we're at the vanguard of this work.
Good to hear. So the next question concerns PG students, particularly PGR students, whose subjects have been withdrawn as part of Kent 2030. They'll still be at Kent well beyond the phase teach out for undergraduates. Now, this means that they find themselves with no lecturers in their subject on site, not officially belonging by name to any of the new schools, and without a research environment that caters to their subject. Given the reduction of opportunities for support, learning, networking, and collaboration that this may create, how will these students be provided the full PhD experience and be looked after by Kent until they graduate?
That's a really good question, and I know one that Kent Student Union officers have raised previously around support for PGR students. And because of that intervention, actually, we do now have a better structure in place in terms of support for PGR students whose supervisors leave, which could be for a range of reasons. So I appreciate the question. It's around phase out subject areas, but of course there are other reasons that people may move on or may get unwell or whatever it might be. So PGR is quite interesting because it's not the same as the kind of classic undergraduate or master's course where you're looking at a whole course and a wide range of provision. Obviously, when you're a PhD student, you're working much more closely with one or two individuals on a particular piece of work. So yes, it is more complicated. That said, we clearly need to make sure that we are supporting those students. We do have the Graduate Researcher College, which I hope can provide some point of identity for students and also support for students. So I'm certainly happy to investigate that and see if that might be one solution. And we certainly will need to support those students, ensuring they get the expert provision and supervision that they need to complete their studies. So we do need to do that, and again, I'd be interested to understand more about the specifics so that I can explore and address that.
And the good thing is that obviously anyone who submitted a question, we are able to go back to them and ask them for more specifics and help them individually, as well as put that answer out there.
That's great, Lulu. And I'm certainly happy to pick up any questions after the session that might be needed. But obviously we can go to those people through your team.
So the next question is, several Arts Hum students have written in to seek clarity on why their courses were closed despite good ranking, achievement and satisfaction.
That's another good and tough question. So arts and humanities are absolutely foundational to Kent. We were founded in 1965 on the basis of being a broad-based university with arts, humanities, social sciences, and that commitment does continue. It is true to say that the areas where there has been a reduction in demand from students who want to take courses has differentially impacted the humanities. That is true, not just at Kent, nationally. And we can probably all recognise the reasons for that, certainly in terms of cultural wars and media outlet discussion about the humanities. But we know at Kent that there's a huge amount that arts and humanities have to offer. And we saw that during COVID, and we've seen that we see that all the time in terms of things like digital humanity. There's all sorts of areas where these subjects play a really contemporary and important part to our understanding, particularly in a world that we have now, where there's conflict and uncertainty. So we do have that foundational commitment. It is true to say that there are certain courses where we haven't had sufficient demand to continue to run them in a way that ensures we can provide the student experience that we need to. We just, from a sort of financial viability point of view, it's not been possible. It's not been a reflection on the quality of those courses, or the staff teaching them, or the students taking them. It is a question of what is viable. And these are some of the tricky decisions. I think it's fair to say these have been unpleasant things that we've had to do. We're not the only university that's had to do them. but to support the wider endeavour of the university and their choices that we've needed to make.
So we're going to move on to our next category, which is surrounding business as usual teaching. So essentially, we all know that Kent is a widely participation university. Many of our students come from different national and international backgrounds, and the university's mission is to support students from all backgrounds to access, succeed in, and progress from higher education. Now, with such a diverse student body, it's understandable why some of these questions concerning teaching reflect those specific contexts, but there are also some that are about a more general base. So the first question is that several students have written in regarding equality, equity, diversity and inclusion at Kent. Some comments raise that EDI training offered is outdated, sometimes to the point of insensitivity, and others that the ILP effectiveness they feel is restricted by a lack of consideration in the timetabling process and failure to adhere to Kent inclusive practices. Whilst Kent has many EDI policies and procedures, many students seem to think that both staff and the university as an institution are failing to deliver on them. So what is being done to tangibly improve EDI and accessibility at Kent for students?
A lot, but there's still a lot to do, I think it's fair to say. So in terms of what has been happening, we have had a review of our EDI governance at the university, ensuring that we do have that kind of drumbeat of reporting and regularity of understanding what the issues are for staff and for students at the university around EDI issues. We have moved to an idea of having particular principles that underpin all our EDI work, which is around being visibly inclusive, around having data but also lived experience leading our decisions, so data informed but experience led, around being inclusive by design, so this is things like curriculum and the work we're doing to modernise the curriculum is exactly to embed some of those inclusive principles, and also we have moved to the principle of nothing about us without us, which was a term coined by the disability movement, but it's something that we've embodied as a principle of the work we're doing. Now the reason we've moved to principles is because, as you say, there are lots of policies, procedures, frameworks, and actually having that kind of guiding approach to EDI, we hope, will be helpful. We have focused, I think it's fair to say, as a university, particularly on gender inclusion and anti-racism as an institution, which means there is more work certainly that we need to do around other protective characteristics, disability, religion, and other characteristics, and we certainly know we've got work to do in that regard. This is something that our University Council, so like our Board of Governors, have taken interest in, and we've now established a People Committee, which is joint between Council and Executive. And again, this is just, it's to keep things going, keep accountability, make sure we are monitoring. Part of the outcomes of that is reviewing the mandatory training. So we will be reviewing mandatory training, and that mandatory training will also is being considered as part of our review of staff appraisals to make sure staff are supported to understand why it's important to refresh training, to also get feedback on training, so where things work, where they don't work, recognising that this is often quite a fast-moving environment and the legislative framework changes come in as well, which clearly means we need to update and refresh. On the timetable specifically, I don't think it's any secret that we've got work to do. And again, one of our main projects as part of delivering the Kent 2030 strategy is on timetabling, to ensure that we've got something that is more flexible for students, that enables them to be able to have their other commitments around what they need to do while they are studying, but also is alive to issues of accessibility, digital accessibility, time poverty, these sorts of issues. So it's complex. I think we do have some things to celebrate. The work we've done in collaboration actually with Kent Student Union around the Student Voices projects has been amazing and has certainly contributed to markers that the university has succeeded. So we've got Silver Athena Swan Award, which is around gender equality, and we've just secured the Bronze Award for Race Equality Charter Mark. So again, loads of work to do, but they indicate that we are on the right trajectory, and we've now got clear action plans in place to deliver on some of those things. So I'm sorry it's a long answer, Lily, but you will know this is something that's really, really close to my heart. So
yeah. I know that you worked particularly before taking up this office, within EDI at the university and have pushed quite hard on it, so I think it's a good question to have you answer because you do know the specifics. Yes, so, let me see. The next question is, in light of the current situation at Kent with the course cuts, with public acknowledgement of debt, which is not unique to this university, and decline in the rankings, what assurances can you provide to current students, prospective students and alum regarding the quality of their education and the lasting value of their degrees in the eyes of employers and other external organisations? I know that you talked earlier about value for the degree, and there's a lot of work going into that. So yeah, I think this is a good moment to elaborate on some of that.
Sure. So I think one thing is that because of the wider financial context, we sometimes spend a lot of time focused on that. But actually, as a university, we are held in really high regard, nationally and internationally. Employers, industry partners, nationally, there are, like Kent is seen as a good university. We are a good university. We have a lot to be proud of, and we can see that through the contribution of many of our alum, our honorary graduates, through our partnerships. There's a lot to be proud of. So I think for me it's also partly about shouting about that and saying, look, these are the really good things that happen at the university. And yes, I've got my degree from a really good place. So I think there's part of that self-promotion that we need to collectively work on, whilst of course we still address our challenges and what we need to do better in. It was pleasing to see the increase in rankings in the Times league table, not just because it's an increase, but because they've changed their metrics and they've actually started including some things that do matter to Kent, like diversity, student body, that sort of thing. So it's really pleasing to see that there is that change in what does good look like, and that with some of those changes, Kent actually then starts to shine a bit more around some of those things we really do value around widening participation and inclusivity and provision for students from all backgrounds. So that, I think, is something to be proud of. And in terms of the future, that is exactly the work that we are doing around the curriculum modernisation, is to make sure that students they have a good understanding before they join us of what to expect from the degree, how they can fit their other commitments around their study, and that they are supported to succeed regardless of background. And those are really the sort of design principles of the curriculum modernisation work that we're undertaking at Kent.
Great, and obviously, the university have involved us at several points with the new timetabling plans, etc. So if anyone in the audience or on the live stream would like to make their comments about that known, please by all means get in touch with your union and we can pass those on and we can make sure that they are part of the conversation, because student voice only works when students use their voices. But yeah, so in the research participation scheme module for psychology, many available studies always state we are unable to test on participants with Afro-textured hair. And effectively, students feel that this excludes black students from these studies and limits their access to essential credits and research experiences. Alternatives are now available in other institutions, such as encouraging students to come with their hair pre-braided, offering guidance on how to prepare their hair for EEG studies, or using specialised electrodes. Now, this has helped in these institutions to bridge this inclusion gap and creates equitable opportunities for black students' academic advancement and research participation. Could the university clarify what steps are being taken to address these accessibility issues in EEG testing? Very specific, I know.
Yeah, it is specific, and my background is psychology, so I know the school of psychology quite well, and I know the research participation scheme well. I certainly did when I was working as an academic in the school. Not good enough, I think it's fair to say. I think that we need to work with the school to understand what are the drivers behind that. I am confident that it will be around equipment and provision of what we can offer in terms of our facilities, clearly we need to do something about that, and I will need to investigate that further. I would certainly hope, and I'm confident that the school do provide opportunities for demonstrations, for other ways of ensuring students can receive credit, so they're not disadvantaged from that respect. But certainly one I will need to pick up with the school, because clearly there are ways we can resolve this. We need to be doing everything we can to resolve it, particularly as I know it is a school that's committed to inclusivity and ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to participate in research, and that research is representative of the whole population.
And I think that's what's really good about conversations like these, because now that we're able to have a two-way stream of kind of conversation and we're able to open that up to students, things come through that, you know, in an institution of this size, we may not always see these individual cases. So yeah, obviously, as I've said at the beginning, we will be able to follow up on these questions and get more clear answers, but it's also a great opportunity for you and your office to be able to take them away and find some gaps that need to be filled to do that work.
Yeah, it definitely is, and there is nothing like hearing it directly from students. So I really appreciate the time that people have taken to submit their questions and participating in them, and to you for organising it and the team. And the student voice team.
Yes, so the next question is, why aren't lecturers utilising more innovative and interactive teaching methods that could enhance student engagement and understanding? What is being done more broadly to assume that teaching at Kent remains at the forefront of the higher education sector? And this did come from a law student, but I think it's applicable to many others.
Okay, I only raised my eyebrows because I'm a bit surprised from law. So there are actually lots of examples of innovative practice at the university. We've got award-winning staff and students involved in innovative approaches to teaching and provision. And I know that some of the awards we do internally through the university, through the Students' Union, but also externally recognise some of that innovation and advancement of the teaching offer. I think for me this is around how we ensure we share best practice and how we can really be in a position that everybody has the opportunity to innovate at teaching. And again, doing this curriculum refresh is a great opportunity for that kind of reset and sharing of good practice. And I do think I would encourage students to participate in feedback opportunities where you get them. So if you're asked questions about your module, and I know survey fatigue is a real thing, but if you do have the opportunity, really the qualitative comments often are even more helpful than the quantitative. If you can actually say, this module would benefit from a refresh or could do with some more innovative methods. Or if you've seen good things elsewhere, then share those as well, so that we can really get that best practice involved more widely. We are kind of from a more systematic point of view trying to make sure that innovation in curriculum and teaching design in education and integrating latest research methodologies into teaching, that's all recognised as part of our reward and recognition process for staff at the university as well. So that should help too.
Yeah, great. And I think that there is, I've seen certainly in my degree, there are definitely pockets of best practice. There are lecturers and seminar leaders who are able to think in new ways and bring new opportunities in terms of the way that we learn things. And I think also the context is shifting a lot. I mean, we've spoken in the past in a few discussions about AI and how technology is moving and can be good or bad for these situations. But I think it's like you say, it's about replicating that and finding where it's good and moving it forward into other areas.
Yeah, we do now at the university have a scholarship and professional practice network for academics and professional service colleagues as well, who are working more in that kind of development of scholarly activity around education, around integrating professional practice skills within the curriculum. And again, that's trying to give that more visibility, more of a sense of community and network, to enable some of that sharing of good practice and really spreading it. And I think, as a university, we're also lifelong learning. Just because you are an expert in your discipline, it doesn't mean that you haven't still got new things to learn and understand and integrate into your thinking of future approaches. So that's part of what we need to address as well.
Great. So the next question comes from a KBS student. So the university has halted the conference and data collection funds last year. It was supposed to be for a few months, but it hasn't resumed. And they have no funds for external events for PhD students. Is this going to be sorted out, or are they not going to get anything for their final year? Again, a very specific question for a specific school.
Yeah, one that is, I don't know the answer, I'll need to take it away.
Which is fine.
It's certainly the case that with PhD students there should be we have a regular sort of planning of what the PhD looks like, what's required to complete the PhD, so that should be a dialogue between the supervisor and the student in terms of what's required to actually meet the outcomes of the degree. And we certainly need to ensure we're providing what we need to secure the outcomes of the degree. In terms of opportunities for external events and things, these things might be that they were offered maybe as part of a grant or a particular scheme that's no longer offered, perhaps a funded project or what have you. But I will need to, and I will take that away because I'm afraid I don't know the answer.
That's fine, and we can also go back to that individual student as well as posting that more broadly. So we move on to our next section, which is about the campus. So the University of Kent has 2 UK campuses, Canterbury and Medway. Students in the South East region, as I'm sure most of us in this room are aware, suffer from above average accommodation and transport prices, partly due to our proximity to London, as well as a whole other factors. But therefore, we are perhaps more significantly impacted then by cost of living. So many students actually commute from around the region and even London to be able to afford to come to university. And regardless of whether you're a full-time or a part-time student, our campuses are the heart of our community and students feel very passionately about them, which we will see reflected. So our first question is about accommodation. So accommodation prices are currently too expensive for what is provided and continue to go up every year when our maintenance loan does not. Obviously this was written before and the maintenance loan is increasing, but perhaps not in line with how accommodation has. So will this continue or will something be done to make campus more affordable for students?
This partly links, I think, Lulu, to what I was saying at the beginning around the wider review of finances for the section for students, because I think you're right, the question may have been written for the changes to the maintenance, but we know that they are very individual based anyway, what you can secure through maintenance and don't necessarily easily reflect your actual situation, or you may have had circumstance changes. So I do think there's that kind of wider question around how we support students in what is a very expensive time. We have a cost of living crisis nationally, but that is impacting students in particular ways. And what we can do specifically at Kent to support as best we can, recognising that we're also experiencing the impact of those rising costs and in fact following the budget more rising costs like the national insurance contribution, for example, which we expect to impact the university. So it is a good question. So there's things we're doing to mitigate this, but I don't think I could say that we are able to solve it. I don't think it's something we can solve, but we can certainly mitigate as best we can for students. So some of this is the more immediate things we've been doing. So as I said, making sure we've got provision of, we call it a ladder of rents, so that we've got a wide range of choice in terms of our accommodation offer. In general, in terms of student choice for that accommodation, up until this year, we've actually seen a preference for the more expensive accommodation offers on campus. But this year, we've seen a marked change and actually much more, and I'm sure this reflects exactly the view that your questioner is submitting. But we are still providing a choice as best we can. Now, within that, we also, it is an inclusive package. So at least if you're renting accommodation at university, you know that it includes your utilities, it includes your Wi-Fi, it does have the sports membership. So there's those things that we do to make sure that you can be complete in your living room on campus. Some of them also have meal packages included as well. Of course, there's other things that are more systematic to how we support students around some of this. We do have transport deals, so we have subsidised bus travel, for example, and some of the things we are looking to do around timetable are to enable students to undertake part-time work. We're a big employer, and I know Kent Students' Union are a big employer as well, so we want to support student employment, obviously to an extent that it's suitable for their full-time studies, but really supporting those employment opportunities and enabling students to take part-time jobs through timetabling and those sorts of things that we discussed before, particularly knowing when to expect to have your classes and labs and whatnot. So there's those components. There are things that we try to do and always welcome more feedback on some of these things. So for example, the low price meal deal that I mentioned before, free sanitary products are available on campus, and we do have access to hardship funds. These sorts of things, but again, all welcome more suggestions and recognise this is a longer term issue for students, which is why again, focusing on the value of the degree. You know, it's the longer term, will you get the graduate level jobs, the higher earnings that ensure, and that's what we're focused on, is really making sure that our offer is revolving around that.
I think it's really great to have all of these different routes to mitigating some of those factors. But I think what a lot of students are struggling with at the moment is those factors in the first place. And whilst the University of Kent can't control the wider financial context, and I know we all wish we could, but I think for students, in terms of certainly the accommodation and such, this seems like something that Kent does have within its control. So I think a lot of students are seeking clarity and appreciate the work that's being done for widening participation funds, for access to activities and access to education funds, as well as all of the initiatives that you've mentioned. But is there any way to get clarity on whether we can expect to see accommodation rise?
I don't know the details on the accommodation basis going forward. I do know that we've frozen accommodation for a number of years. I think it went up this year. That was the first time in a number of years that the accommodation prices has risen. So although it's sort of invisible because the costs are rising in the background, that is a form of investment and support. And, you know, it doesn't necessarily feel like that, but that's what it is. That's where it comes from. And again, this is also part of the lobbying that people like me and others on the executive team are really involved in, is making sure that we are making the case for students, of course alongside students' unions and other interest groups, but really ensuring that the government do understand that there are a lot of hidden costs and that the current funding system isn't working for students.
Yeah, it sure isn't. But again, you know, that is something that is a national basis, and I think we're not the only ones feeling the pinch, like you said. But yeah, the next question regarding our lovely campus is about parking. So students feel that there isn't enough parking on campus for commuters. Blue badge holders in particular have mentioned they do not feel that there is enough spaces in the Library Road car park, and whilst there are blue badge spaces spread across the campus, obviously when you have accessibility needs, they need to be as close to where you're going as possible. So essentially, is anything going to be done about this?
Parking, always contentious. Interesting because it's one of those that actually, this is really the first year I think since COVID that we've really felt actually the campus more alive, and that has lots of positives, but it does bring in those logistical challenges that we've not been experiencing for a while, parking being one of them. So I think it'd be helpful perhaps we can go back to the question of to differentiate between the blue permit and the blue badge, and I think that's an important differentiation because clearly in terms of blue badge and accessibility of parking, we do need to make sure that students with accessibility needs are able to get where they need to get to, and that there's clear visibility on where those parking spaces are, because I think it's possible that there are more in central campus that people don't necessarily know where they are. I'm just thinking in my mind, I can think of a few that I haven't seen occupied. So that it might be partly around communication and messaging. The blue permit, I think, is more around, wider parking opportunities, and I think Parkwood there's generally spaces. But again, this is something where we need the feedback, and I know that there is actually, I think it's called the transport survey, but I think it will cover parking, is live at the moment. So if you're a student and you're able to participate in that survey, please do, because the feedback we get around these things will help with our forward planning.
And can they find the survey just on the 10th student website?
I will make sure that you get the link, Leo. Maybe you can say.
Thank you.
Because I think it's live. I will need to check. It might not be yet.
That's fine. Better that it isn't live if it's live when the questions go out. Perfect. So this question comes from a Medway student. January starters are significantly disadvantaged in comparison to September starters. One such instance is transport. The shuttle doesn't run over the summer for the January cohort students, who continue with their normal lectures and exams over the summer. Does the university have any plans to address this inequality?
This is one that I, again, will need to take word. I don't know the details, but clearly if there's a need and a requirement, we need to make sure that it's addressed in some way. As a January starter, it sounds like there's more need to do January starters in Medway. I'm guessing again this is one for the business school, but I will take it away. I don't know.
That's absolutely fine. Yeah, so let me see. So the quality of food on campus and food in campus in general is always a good question that's running around. So some students feel that the quality of food on campus has deteriorated over the past few years, and options are being limited to too many fast food and not healthy options. Rutherford, the meal deal, obviously is great in that cost effectiveness, but some students feel that it's gone downhill in terms of quality and in portion sizing. Are there any plans to improve the food or at least get it back to the way it was?
Good question. So I think everyone knows we are a right to food university, and part of that is making sure that our students do have access to affordable food and healthy food. And that's really what Rutherford has been focused on. And there are options that are plant-based, are ensuring they are healthy. I think, of course, a lot of these things is around, it is those balances of price to quality, and I know the team are absolutely dedicated to ensuring that we find the best point in all that we can. We did have a change to our approach to some of our food offering on campus about a year ago, and that actually did come from some student feedback. And this is where it gets complicated, and you'll experience this more than I do, really, in that students, there's lots of differences even within the student community, aren't there? And certainly at the university we've experienced a significant rise in the number of Deliveroo and Just Eat drivers on campus, and a lot of that refers to kind of food offering. So we've got that kind of convenience, maybe not the most healthy options that students are looking for, but also if you're here and this is your, the way you live, whether you in accommodation on campus or not, you spend a lot of time on campus. We need to make sure we've got that balance, and I know that the catering team, as part of the wider catering review, are considering options around how we can ensure there's choice for students. Really important, but yeah, I understand.
Yeah, so we'll move on to our next set, which is actually the audience questions. So this is an opportunity for people online or in person to ask any questions. Now, bearing in mind there isn't much time left, but we will try and get through as many as we can. And again, any that can't be answered, the QR code on all the posters and online is still active, and that will stay open until tomorrow. So if there are any questions that you think of later or that you weren't able to ask, then you'll be able to do that, and they'll be added to that list of questions that we will work together to get back to students. So we've got our ushers with our mics, and would anyone in the audience like to ask any questions? We've got one at the front here and then one there. So we'll come to the front first. Hi, Gabby.
Hiya. Oh, is this on?
Yeah, just hold it a bit more.
Oh, there we go. How's that? Perfect. So hi, thank you so much. Just to say, I'm the chair of the Student Accessibility Network, so it made me really happy to hear how passionate you are about EDI and some of the great work that you've done, and also your acknowledgement of how far we've got to go. I really appreciated that. My question, because we've been working with the Staff Accessibility Network as well, is the Staff Accessibility Network were quite disheartened about their ability to get involved compared to their working hours, because they said to me that in equivalent, all of the co-chairs, there are 5 co-chairs, they're given 0.5 of a day, which means that they only have 2.5 days in a term to provide events or do campaigns. Obviously, students, we have a lot more free time compared to staff, but I wondered, what commitment are you doing for staff to improve EDI?
Really good question, thank you, Gary. So again, one of these that we know we've got work to do, and I think it's also fair to say that the work of the Staff Disability Network has increased. There are more staff now raising issues that need to be addressed. There's more accessibility requirements, and quite right, more expectation on what the university will do to support accessibility requirements. So I think it's a mixture of the two things. Absolutely outstanding teams. So I know some of the co-chairs really, they're doing outstanding work, and again, really trying to embed some of that accessibility work within curriculum, within kind of normal processes, if you like, rather than having to do just the casework, which is also important, but they're doing both sides of the equation. This is something we're looking at as part of our EDI action plan. So it's slightly complicated because we have the way that academic workload is allocated and professional service work is allocated is not the same, and there's sorts of particular issues that need to be worked through. And again, we are in resource-constrained environments, so there's priorities to be made, but it is something that we're reviewing, is how we can support our staff network chairs, and alongside that, how we can integrate the student networks and staff networks more coherently, which sounds like it's really working for you. So I'd be offline interested to hear a bit more about that. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time so far. I was wondering, and I don't know how far you can answer this yet, but with the fee increases, do you have any idea how that will impact kind of the international student community on campus? Because obviously, I know once that was announced by the UK government, I know a lot of international students were quite nervous because obviously it's quite a big jump in tuition fee. If you've got just any idea, or even if not, on how that might impact international students on campus, thank you.
So the policy change was for England, so that the government regulated group fee, and the announcement that was made was for England specifically. So there's that kind of policy environment. International fees have always been set differently, and are considered as part of undergraduate and postgraduate. They're very course dependent as well. So already international fees tend to increase, not necessarily in line with inflation, but there will be consideration of inflation when the prices are reviewed for the international fee. But we know that there's cost of living pressures for international students as well. So again, we've been really supporting with scholarships. They've been targeted at countries where we know there's particular economic barriers to access. But again, just really trying to make sure we're providing what we can to support international students, whether it's ongoing, but also at times of particular need. So we know, for example, some students from Nigeria, when there was the economic crisis there, particular access to funds was required. All those sorts of things exist within our existing frameworks and policies, and we'll always be reviewing those to make sure that our students have got support if it's an emergency or if it's really needed. But it's a good question, and I don't know the specifics now. We have the kind of schedule of when we release fees, and there are particular approvals that need to be gone through for that.
Do you know off the top of your head, like, roughly what that schedule is in terms of when international students might get clarity for the next years?
Well, this latest announcement is rather change the schedule, right? So no, it's normally ahead of when we're doing advertising for courses. So if it's not out already for international students, it will be
shortly. Okay, thank you very much. So are there any more questions in the audience? Okay, so we've got 2 here. So if we can start over here.
Yeah, thank you. I've got a couple questions regarding how the university could show more support to refugees, considering the current climate, especially since there are probably students here who are refugees as well. I was wondering how the university at least could create a more open, inclusive environment for conversations about refugees and refugee-related issues, as well as whether or not you have any experience or strategies potentially other universities or institutions use to engage their communities in discussions about refugees, and how it could be applied into our own context. Because personally, I think there could be a lot more done to get students involved. For instance, a lot of people in psychology, which is what I'm studying, they ask what kind of work experience they've been doing over the summer, and they can't find any jobs. But I think there would be a lot more valuable experience that they could receive by doing volunteering, interacting with refugees, because there's no psychological help at the moment for them. And I was wondering what you think the university could do as well.
Yes, thanks for the question, and sounds like an interesting idea to explore. And again, I'll be happy to kind of perhaps get some more details around some of those specifics. In terms of the wider support, it is something that we are committed to. So I'll say that, as a university, we are committed to supporting refugees and others seeking sanctuary. So we are working on a series of initiatives around sanctuary. We've set up a sanctuary scholarships program, so we do have a number of students, refugees, who are on scholarships with the university and are being supported. It's often complex cases, so there's often other things that students are dealing with alongside the studies. And as always with these things, it's the individuals behind the statistics, isn't it, that really you do see the impact of the work that they're doing. So although the numbers are small, it's high value and good impact for those individuals. There's also, we support the Council for At-Risk Academics, which is also another way that we can support the refugee and sanctuary community to really ensure that they're able to be included within the university. I don't disagree there. I mean, we can see that there's a lot more conflict and actually, discussions around academic freedom, freedom of expression. We know these are also differentially experienced, and these are the kind of places exactly where universities need to be showing that thought leadership and involved. So we want to engage more. If you've got ideas, I'm really, really welcome hearing them. But I also like your suggestion that we could look elsewhere and see other ways of doing that engagement. So I will take that on board as well. And thanks for the question.
Thank you.
And then we move up here. Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Ben, a History of Art PhD. Thank you for your time today. I was an undergrad here a number of years ago, and I remember there was quite a lively community sort of in the school building. So thinking back, so I'm School of Arts, so you'd walk into Jarman building and there was always lots going on. There was a reception there, always staff milling around, there was always students doing things, there was always events, guest speakers in the evenings, end of year awards that were going on, lots to involve students in, sort of cookie and coffee mornings and various things like that. Sadly, since COVID and the various restructures that Ken has gone through, and I appreciate there's not much money now, and lecturers have a lot more work to do because there's fewer staff. I understand all of that. But what this all really detracts from is a community feel at local level. I'm sure that many students would agree that they get most of their Kent experience from their own lecturers and what happens locally within their own schools. It would be nice to think, and this is my question now, now that we are moving back from divisions to a school level, may there be some kind of improvement at school level for students so a reintroduction of events that happen within their school buildings. So rather than entering a building and finding no one there, I mean, a lot of the buildings, again, even though we do have lots of students here, a lot of the buildings are deadly quiet and they're empty, and it doesn't contribute to community. So if we're moving back to schools rather than divisions, will there be please some reintroduction to events, community feel, things going on and stuff like that? That's my serious question. I have one nice question to add as well. I believe next year is the 60th birthday for Kent. Will there be some nice things going on next year? Thank you.
Both good questions, thank you. So first one on community. I mean, absolutely, campus-based university, community is everything, and is actually part of who we are, is our community. So I completely agree. I think your question though indicates the complexity around some of this. So some of it is where we've had to make choices around finances, so what can we continue to support to really preserve the academic excellence and experience and outcomes for students, and then what's the kind of additional on top that we've had to make some cutbacks to, and that is the reality of the situation that we've faced. Some of it is around the way the university is structured, and decisions around structure, were very much around efficiency, around resilience, but I think a recognition that actually that did take some of the community feel out of the academic experience. So you're right, by coming to a school approach, we hope that students are closer to a kind of disciplinary home, and that we can really support that connection between academics and students and professionals supported in those areas. And the other part, of course, is COVID, which means that the way people choose to engage and interact has changed, and is still changing. So I think there's some of that, there's still a bit of a cycle that we're on, isn't there? So it's trying to combine all those things. Now, what we are trying to do is make sure that like this event, we do have some opportunities for online as well as in person, that we're providing more touch points locally, and that we, I know the comms and events team are working on how we can corral some events, so there's more visibility of what's going on, because I think actually often there are events, but people don't know about them necessarily, because there's so much information, isn't there? We get information overload, so it's like how to easily find what's going on. And I think some of this is a bit of watch this space, so I hope so, that with some of the work we've done. Workloads are still tricky, but we know that part of what motivates students and staff on campus is community, so we have to try and preserve and protect that. And that is where things like the 60th, actually, because it's a nice question, that they interrelate, actually. The 60th is a great opportunity for us to reflect on what community was then, what it is now, the university was absolutely pioneering, and it was all around interdisciplinarity, cross-fertilisation across subjects, the college system, it was all around trying to promote that sense of community and doing things differently. And I think the 60th is an opportunity for us to say, well, what does that look like today for us in a world that is much more kind of siloed, busy, technology focused? Like, how do we preserve and protect that kind of foundation of who we were, who we are? And it will be an opportunity to do some nice things as well. So there will be a series of we call them diamond events. So and a lot of these are around our campus. So we planted a series of trees actually as part of a diamond. I'm trying to remember the name, so forgive me if I haven't got this quite right. It's Diamond Orchard or something like that. And looking at what we can do around some of that sustainability work, campus work. And there will be a series of events, so watch this space and please participate if you can.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. We do have a question that's come in from online. Would you be able to clarify what the changes to Kent catering will mean for student workers?
So I alluded earlier to that we're doing a review of our catering offer, and that isn't just the food we offer, it's how we do catering at the university. And there's a range of different models out there. So as one of the earlier questions was saying, we've looked at what others are doing, been doing some of that around catering, and looking at a range of offers. Now we've not landed on what we're going to do yet, but a core principle for us is ensuring that our students have access to part-time work. And again, linked to the community question, we know that it's not just the money for the work, it's actually the community and what that brings to them more broadly as working in some of those venues on campus. You get to know people coming in for coffees and things, or vice versa. So it is part of that community as well. So it's absolutely one of the design principles, but judging from the question, we haven't necessarily communicated that well enough to our student employees. So we don't need to do better on that front, and I will take that away.
I think for student workers more generally, in this financial context, there is a lot of uncertainty because, we live in a time of, I could go off about this, but I won't, automation and outsourcing and yada, many things that have their pros and have their cons. And essentially for students right now, especially here at Kent and other places in the southeast or London, where there is even more of a pinch with cost of living due to pre-existing high prices, many students at Kent just couldn't be here without part-time work, and without part-time work that is flexible around their studies. And obviously we know that the work around the timetabling, etc., is hopefully going to alleviate some of that pressure by making sure that students have their timetables much more in advance, that their timetable is structured in a way that it frees up time for part-time work. But that part-time work has to be there in the first place. And I think, having spoken to students, concerns about employment are more about when you are in the financial situation that higher education as a whole is at the moment. There are going to be cutbacks, and a lot of those are going to be on jobs and hours, and expecting people to do more for less. And I think particularly for this question, clarifying what changes to Kent Catering will mean for student workers is particularly around understanding that their style of work may change based off of how catering changes come or don't come, but also about their kind of security in their jobs and their hours, and making sure that whatever the changes are, they'll still get work on campus that allows them to make the most out of that degree and get that value.
And all totally fair concerns, and I think probably things that need to be worked through in some of the detail of the plans that come next. And again, I know that these are the sorts of questions that as a students' union you're challenging exec, challenging the council around what does this mean for our students, and how can we shore up that security as best we can. I don't have all the answers. We do at the moment actually have a good record of student employment, both as a university and as a students' union. Actually, I know it's something that nationally as a students' union you're recognised for the opportunities that you give to students, and that's one of the things I was talking about earlier, about how we make sure we shout loud and proud about the things we do well. But of course it's something that we need to watch. There may be more opportunities and there may be better security, but definitely needs to be part of the design principles of what we take forward in pursuing those options and making the choices the next steps. It's not just catering, I should say.
Yeah.
There's also things like student ambassadors or mobility schemes.
And it's great to hear that is on the forefront of the mind in these discussions, because obviously Kent is a huge employer regionally, but also within our student community. And it's great to have these employment opportunities on campus, especially as such a proportionately large university for such a kind of small area. We'll watch this space. Are there any more questions from the audience still? Awesome. Yeah, 2 months over there.
Hello, my question is going to be about ADHD or students with ADHD dyslexia. I overheard a few students, law students, speaking about study spaces, and they decided to come up to the cafe to study because they were a group of 3 girls, and they were complaining about how they can't study in the library and it's too noisy, the environment's not right for them to study and they can't study in their accommodation. So when I overheard their conversation, I approached them and I said, I'm a student rep and I want to hear what you've got to say, because I might be able to bring you up in question time. So that's true because I have ADHD. I also struggle with when I go to the library to find a quiet space to study because it's an overwhelming environment for myself. And then I also spoke to another girl who had ADHD and we went to a study group to learn about how to write essays. And she was a drama student and she mentioned similar things to me at the end in terms of like studying in the library. So I can see there's a lot of students actually struggling from different schools. So we've got law students, drama students, and I'm studying architecture. And study spaces are not providing what they should be for all students and the equality of all students. Then again, I also have been in contact with some students from the lesbian gay community. And they also feel that they're not being represented really well. I come from Manchester, and Manchester has quite a few universities, but the lesbian and gay community is very well presented in the north. Manchester, Liverpool, my best friend is in Liverpool, and it's very well presented. You can see it on the streets. You can walk with pink hair and a skirt, and nobody will nobody will turn their head. So it's a because this is the South, wearing rings can be a thing. So coming back to my question is, what is the university doing for students with the lesbian gay community? They're struggling to express themselves fully. And also with students with disabilities, neurodivergent disabilities. What is the university doing to provide better spaces for them to study where they don't feel overwhelmed?
Both really good questions. So in terms of accessibility of study space, I think this is linked to that question around what we're doing for the Staff Disability Network as well, because actually a lot of this is recognising that the types of accessibility, what accessibility looks like now in a post-COVID world in 2024 is very different, and a lot of this is how we work through some of those things. So the library's been designed for a particular environment, and it may work for many students, but I hear what you're saying, that it doesn't work for all students. And again, that's something I obviously will need to go and speak to the library about specifically, because it might be that there are different types of study space, but again, we don't have the visibility of where they are, how to access them. There may be other study spaces on campus that we have, or that we can repurpose for appropriate study spaces. So I think there's always these kind of opportunities open to us, but I recognise that these are accessibility issues that we do need to address, and I will take that one. In terms of wider representation, I think this is for me is around what we can do, particularly on campus, and links to that sense of the visible, talks about the principles of visible inclusion is really important for us. And there are some concrete things we are doing in this space, that we and actually Students' Union are doing, around ensuring that there's different events to participate in, that there's different ways of expressing or having fun or whatever it might be, for different communities and different protected characteristics as students. We sponsor the Canterbury and Medway Pride, again to show that as a university this matters to us and we represent these things. And making that, again, one of the EDI, so we talked about EDI earlier, one of the priorities that we did put in place for EDI training was for our campus security staff. Again, recognising that until everybody's safe, nobody's safe, and it's these kind of activities that we're really prioritising. So keen to hear any other ideas and suggestions. We are in a geographical context, that's true, but there are things we can do around campus and what we provide specifically as a university, and the values that we express and are proud of, to also influence our community, which I hope you see.
Thank you.
Sorry, just before we move on, sorry. I do also want to highlight the Student Voices project, because our LGBTQIA one is actually coming out on December 4th. Yeah, I got the date right too. So obviously a lot of work has been done with the university and the union actually working together in terms of funding, in terms of research, and actually recognising that we do have a wide participation university, recognising that we have an incredibly diverse student body that we are incredibly proud of, and that making sure that just having a space isn't enough, because you can have an empty space and you can say everyone is welcome here, but that doesn't necessarily make people comfortable. It doesn't necessarily address the different barriers and needs that they have. And ongoing work that we have is part of the Student Voices work, where last year we did the Black Student Voices project. This year we managed to do 2 projects, which is the LGBTQIA plus one, as well as the International Student Voices. And we're actually going to take all 3 of those and in the venue on December 4th, present that research, and there will be actual digital copies of that research available online. But also it's a point for students to engage and have their own say, even if they weren't involved in the study groups. And then from that research, that's going to hopefully impact the way that things are done at Kent, and shows us as a union what we need to push for, and also shows the university the gaps that they may not have been aware of before. So I just wanted to highlight that in case you weren't aware of that, and to show that on our side, like, we are working with the university and they have been very open to those suggestions.
Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry for cutting you off, but go ahead.
First off, I want to say thank you for your time. You've answered a lot of questions that the students have had, but I'm a student of a representative of the law school, and a couple of students have come up to me and said that, like, involving Project 2030, where everyone is affected by it, obviously, and there are a couple of questions involving the fees, which you have answered, but there are also questions involving elective modules, whereby certain students are concerned of, in the first year, they choose modules for the second year, and the second year, the third, and they're wondering whether or not there are going to be some certain cut downs for certain modules, because they're basing their choices from the very start, and how soon those communications are going to go through, or how clear and effective they're going to be to let us know how to prepare for later on, I suppose.
Thanks. It's a really, really good question. Good to pick up on one of the earlier comments actually that did come from law. So again, events like this are great, and I hope we can work with subject representatives as well around some of the wider changes, because again, these are things in the balance. So to be able to provide a timetable that is in advance, that students know what's coming, that we don't have as many clashes, that sort of thing, relies on us having less optionality. So these again are choices, and some of this around structuring the curriculum is making sure that assessments are much closer to delivery. So it really supports student outcomes, reduces attainment gaps, make sure we've got a kind of skills-based approach to learning. But again, the consequence is that there may not be as much breadth of optionality, but there will still be optionality. So it's not that it goes away, it's just the way that it's structured is different. So it's over a longer time period. The first year, particularly the first term, is much more core delivery to enable us to be able to provide that timetable, that assessment methodology that we know will support student outcomes. So, but clearly, from your question and others that we've had, we've not done well enough to communicate the benefits of that. So we've got work to do, and I will take that away. And thank you for the question.
Amazing, we've had some great questions. I just want to open it up one last time to anyone else before we kind of sign out, and also kind of raise that there are a few different things going on at the university right now that you can actually get your voice directly in, and there are going to be ongoing projects with opportunities for you to do that, which will help actually feed back into some of this work that we've been talking about. So as much as raising the student voice is important in these individual instances, it's about making sure that we're embedding student voice throughout the future of Kent. I mean, we've talked a lot about student centricity, because Kent 2030, a big part of that is making the university as student-centric as possible. And there's ongoing work as to what that even means, you know, because we don't want to just put, I mean, the university doesn't just want to put something out there. So they're engaging with Kent Union to make sure that that's happening. So I'll talk to you about it a bit in a second, but I will make sure that everyone in the room has an opportunity to ask any last questions before I go on prattle. Going on, going twice. Okay, prattle on. So basically, if we could change the slide, please, to the last one. So at the moment, we've been doing student-centric surveys. So what this means is that the university has helped fund these. We had big in-person focus groups where we talked to hundreds of students, and they were all paid for their time. But there's also an online version of that survey where you can win hundreds of prizes. But basically, the point is to make sure that when we're talking about student-centric, when we're talking about Kent 2030, is about financial sustainability and student centricity. It's making sure that we know what student centricity is, because if the students aren't the ones to voice that, then realistically, how are the academics going to know? But it's also about making sure that your union knows what you want as well. We've had a lot of questions here today about how much things have changed within the past few years, with COVID, with cost of living, with fee increases, et cetera. But the point is that where things are shifting so fast, we need the current students of Kent to tell us what they want so that we can enact it. Because as your union, who works with your university and can be a critical friend sometimes, we really need to hear your voice and make sure that you know that there are complaints processes within the university, there are ways that you can get your voice in the university with the rep forms, etc. But there's also those kind of less formal channels through us, where you can come talk to us as your officers, where you can come talk to the coordinators, and where you can make your voice heard. So hopefully all of you will have got a leaflet today. If you'd like, you can take more than one and give them to your friends or anyone you know who might be having any issues that they want to talk about. But yeah, you can also scan the QR code that's on your leaflet or up there. And I want to thank everyone so much for coming, because it really is important that we continue to have these conversations and keep having touch points where we as students can talk to the university and the university can talk back to us, and we can actually make some progress together. So thank you to everyone who was involved. Thank you to the lovely Gulbenkian team and to our wonderful student voice team at KSU, who none of this would be possible without. And thank you very much to George for your willingness and for your openness in answering those questions. And again, any questions that we haven't been able to answer, we will be able to answer. And anyone who has submitted a question and it hasn't been asked, we will be able to get back to you and let you know when those questions are up. Also, if any of you today have more questions, feel free to use our QR code or just come talk to one of us in the red tops.
Okay. And thank you for inviting me, Lulu, and thanks to everyone for participating in all the questions. We will get to them. Now people have seen my face, feel free to stop me on campus if you want a word at any point. And also, if you do need to get in touch with me on my office, then it's just Vice Chancellor at kent.ac.uk, so really simple to remember. But of course, we'll keep the dialogue going with you as well. Thanks, Lily.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.